The stars shimmered like scattered embers across the void, and through them moved the hunters known as the Xerith. Their ships glided silently, cloaked by living armor that shifted with the black of space. Each vessel was a predator in itself, sleek, jagged, alive. With a quiet hunger, the Xerith had ruled the hunt for generations, and no world had escaped their reach. When they came not as conquerors, but as killers. Their creed was simple. They sought prey. They stalked, they killed, they fed. On the frontier world of Oricel, the hunt began without warning. One moment the settlement breathed in quiet stillness, and the next the sky tore open with streaks of fire. The Xerith descended with spears of light and bodies like towering shadows. They struck not for conquest, but for blood. The colonists scattered and screamed, but screams only drew the hunters faster. The Xerith relished at the rhythm of terror and chase. In the smoke and ruin, a boy named Kai Morgan ran. His lungs burned, his eyes blurred, but he kept running. He was 17. And he had lived all his life among these hills. He knew every path, every stone. But even that knowledge meant nothing against creatures bred for pursuit. He darted through alleys of shattered steel, hearing behind him the clicking laughter of Xerith warriors. He stumbled once and saw a flash of curved blades meant for skin. His father turned and shoved him forward, taking the blow. Without sound, Kai fell into the dust and turned just in time to see the hunters close, and his father's body crumpled and vanished beneath claws. He never forgot the sight, never forgot the smell. Hours later, when the flames had cooled, when the settlement was ash, Kai was pulled from the wreckage by soldiers of the Terran Defense Corps. His face was pale, his eyes dark and hollow. He spoke no words, but in silence he forged a vow. He would see the hunters fall. He would turn their hunt upon them. Captain Elena Ward studied him as they brought him aboard the evacuation ship. She was a woman carved from discipline and fire, tall, sharp, eyed her uniform scorched from too many battles. She bore herself with the weight of command. She had fought the Xerith before. She had lost comrades, entire platoons. Her record bore scars as deep as her face. Yet she remained standing, for her every breath was defiance. She watched Kai and knew in him was a raw shape of resistance. Dr Malik Rios watched too, but with a different gaze. His hands were smudged with grease, his coat torn, and his mind a storm of designs. He was an engineer once bound to the great shipyards of Titan. His brilliance had created engines that sang across the void, but brilliance without power meant nothing. When the Xerith came, his workstations burned and his colleagues vanished. He fled not as a soldier, but as a thinker, a mind gnawed by rage. Where Ward embodied command and Kai embodied survival, Rios embodied the future. He believed humanity could turn scraps into weapons, turn desperation into victory. The ship carried them through silent space, carrying survivors from dozens of broken colonies. Each face told the same story: families gone, worlds lost trust. Shattered Ward stood in the command chamber, staring at the star map. Each glowing point was a human colony, and too many now flickered red. She clenched her fist and whispered not to anyone but to herself, "They believe we are prey." The Xerith believed it with absolute faith. They had watched humans scramble across their fragile worlds, fragile bodies, fragile defenses. The hunters thrive on arrogance. For every world they claimed, they left trophies. They carved the bones of their kills into armor. They strung human skulls in their war halls and sang of victory. They never imagined their prey could rise above the role assigned to them. But Ward imagined as she stood before the survivors and spoke. Her voice carried weight forged in fire. "We have been hunted long enough. We cannot match their strength. We cannot match their speed. But we can match their hunger. We can turn their hunt against them." She looked to Kai and then to Rios. "They will not expect it, and that is why we will win." Kai felt the fire ignite in his chest. His father's death had left a scar that no words could heal. But hearing Ward speak gave shape to the rage. He remembered the laughter of the Xerith, the mocking, chittering sound that would haunt him forever. He whispered to himself, "I will make them fear." Rios, meanwhile, retreated into his workshop. He scavenged parts from broken drones, scorched hull plating, fragments of alien tech. Every piece carried potential. Every fragment whispered defiance. He drew sketches across the wall, equations burning into the air. He muttered of energy, fields of resonance, weapons tuned not for brute power, but for precision. He knew the Xerith were biological titans. Their armor was alive. Their ships pulsed with nerve and sinew. If he could find the right frequency, if he could disrupt the living tissue, he could bring the hunters to their knees. Days blurred into weeks as the survivors hid among the asteroid belts, their ship cloaked by the debris of ruined worlds. Ward drilled them. Kai trained with a blade heavier than his arms could bear, and yet he swung until sweat became blood. He learned to channel the fear and to focus each strike. Carried his father's face each parry, carried the echo of screams. He spoke little, but when he did, his words cut with resolve. They will bleed. The survivors grew restless. Some despaired, others whispered of surrender. The Xerith were gods of war. How could scattered humans hope to resist? Ward heard these whispers, but never allowed them to take root. She walked among the people, spoke their names, reminded them of what had been stolen. Every time a voice faltered, she placed a hand upon a shoulder and said, "They are not gods, they are only predators, and predators can fall." Meanwhile, across the void, the Xerith gathered trophies and sang of their conquest. They spoke of humanity as lesser stock useful for Bloodsport Week, but entertaining a race to sharpen claws upon in their war halls. They did not imagine change. They did not imagine prey with teeth their overconfidence, grew fat their laughter loud. Yet shadows crept at the edges, shadows shaped by Ward, by Rios, by Kai, by every scarred survivor who chose not to kneel. Then came the night when Ward stood once more at the viewport. She watched the stars burn with quiet fury, and she spoke to herself. The hunters think the galaxy belongs to them, but it is vast, and it is changing, and they will not see the change until it is too late. Her reflection flickered against the glass dark eyes, gleaming with something fierce, not desperation, not despair, but resolve of prey that had remembered the art of the strike. Kai stood beside her, silent, but burning. His hand gripped the hilt of a blade he had forged with Rios. Help was crude unbalance, but it was as it carried meaning. He raised it and whispered, "Father, I will not run again." Rios emerged from his lab, eyes red from sleepless nights, hands trembling from too much work. He held a small device, its glow faint, but alive. He said, "Only it works." Ward looked at him and nodded. No further words were needed. The air between them was heavy with what would come. The galaxy slept in ignorance, but beneath the silence something stirred. Humanity had been prey, humanity had been broken, scattered, bled dry, but prey had teeth, prey had memory, prey had rage. In the silence, before the storm, prey had begun to change. The Xerith would learn, they would learn that the hunt cuts both ways, and humanity would make certain the lesson was written in blood. The Xerith believed the frontier worlds had been broken. The hunters returned to their halls, singing of conquest certain, that humanity would scatter into shadows, never to rise again. Their arrogance was iron, their certainty absolute. Yet within the dark silence of drifting wrecks, something began to move. Prey had shifted into something sharper. Captain Elena Ward stood before the survivors gathered in the cold chamber of the hidden base. The asteroid, field beyond, shielded them from scanners and cloaked them in silence. Her gaze swept across faces worn thin by fear, but alive with stubborn sparks. She spoke not as a commander reciting orders, but as a voice burning with conviction. Her words cut through despair. "They think us broken, they think us finished, but I tell you we are still here, and that alone is victory." She let the silence breathe, and then her voice hardened. "We cannot face them ship to ship. We cannot meet them blade to blade, but we can turn the ground beneath them into a weapon. We can make every shadow bleed." Among the crowd, Kai listened, his fists clenched and unclenched with restless fire. His nights were haunted by the image of his father crumpling beneath the claws of the hunters, and each memory carved a deeper groove of rage. He wanted to strike, not tomorrow, not in a plan, but now. His voice broke through the quiet. "Then let us strike, let us show them fear." Ward met his eyes. She saw the storm within him, and nodded slowly. "We will strike, but not as they expect, not with fury alone, but with patience. They underestimate us. Let us use that." Dr Malik Rios watched from the side of the chamber. He carried in his hands a device small enough to fit in his palm, a core of salvaged alloy and repurposed circuits. It pulsed faintly with light. He stepped forward and spoke. His tone carried the excitement of discovery, tempered by exhaustion. "I have tested the theory, their biology, their armor, their ships all resonate at specific frequencies. They are living constructs. If we disrupt that frequency, we can break them." The survivors leaned and listening to the promise of power. Rios continued, "The device is unstable, unpredictable, dangerous, even to us. But if we place it in the right position, it can fry their nervous systems. In seconds, it can blind their ships and shatter their warriors." Ward narrowed her gaze. "Can you build more?" Rios hesitated, his hands trembling from fatigue. "With time, with parts, with help, yes." Ward turned to the crowd. "Then we begin with shadows, small strikes, precise blows. We bleed them until they question themselves." And so the hidden war began. The first raid was nothing more than an ambush on a hunting party. 3 Xerith warriors descended upon a deserted outpost, expecting easy sport. Kai was among them, his breath steady, his blade tight in his grip. He saw the Xerith falter. As the first explosion tore through the hall, Rios' device crackled, and one of the hunters staggered, convulsing. Its living armor screamed. As if alive, Kai lunged, blade flashing. He struck, not with elegance, but with fury. His strike cut deep, and for the first time, he heard the sound he had long dreamed of. The hunter screamed, not in laughter, not in hunger, but in pain. When the news spread, whispers rippled through the survivors of fear that had chained them, began to bend into something else. Hope, a dangerous, fragile hope, but hope all the same. Ward stood at the center of the chamber. After the raid, her face unreadable, she addressed them with calm iron. Remember this moment. They bleed, they die, they are not invincible, but we must not grow careless. This is only the beginning. Kai stood apart, staring at the blood that stained his blade. His heart thundered with triumph, yet behind it lingered a hollow ache. His father was still gone, his people still broken. Victory did not bring peace, only fuel for storm his chest. He whispered to himself, "More, I need more." His mutters filled the chamber. If I expand the resonance, if I refine the harmonics, I can do more, I can tear their ships apart. His obsession grew. He ate little, slept less. Ward watched with wary respect, knowing his brilliance was a blade that could cut both ways. The Xerith did not ignore the loss. Reports reached their high council, praise striking back. At first the hunters laughed, dismissing it as chance, as weakness, thrashing in desperation. But then another hunting party fell, and another. A dozen warriors reduced to carcasses, and the laughter faltered. A creature draped in armor woven from the spines of countless kills spoke with disdain. The praise stir, let them, their deaths will only be sweeter. Yet beneath the arrogance some eyes flickered with unease. Ward sensed that she knew predators thrived on certainty, shatter that certainty, and the hunt would collapse. She ordered more raids, more traps. Every strike was chosen with care, not to destroy fleets, but to slice nerves of humans. Became shadows, unseen voices whispering in the dark. They struck from caves, from wrecks, from asteroid belts, then vanished, leaving only corpses behind. Kai thrived in this war. His body hardened, his skills sharpened. He killed, and killed again. Each battle fed his hunger, each strike whispered of justice. Yet in his silence, Ward saw the danger. He was not only fighting the Xerith, he was being consumed by the fire of vengeance. She approached him once, after a raid, his blade still dripping his breath, ragged. She placed a hand on his shoulder and said softly, "Do not lose yourself in their blood. We fight not only to kill, but survive. Remember that." Kai looked at her, eyes dark with rage. "Survival is not enough, Captain. They took everything. I will not stop until they're gone." Ward did not answer. She saw in him both the weapon humanity needed and the wound that could break him. Rios grew bolder with each experiment. He deployed devices that scrambled Xerith armor, weapons that turned their own energy back upon them in one battle. He set a field generator that caused an entire squad of hunters to convulse and collapse, clawing at their own bodies. The survivors cheered at the sight. But Rios only scribbled notes, eyes fevered. "It can be stronger, it can reach further, I can make it perfect." But perfection came at cost. Resources thin, supplies dwindled. The survivors began to argue. Some demanded retreat to safer ground. Others pushed for greater strikes. Ward held them together through a loan, reminding them of the larger purpose. Every strike we make is a message. We are not prey, we are the hunters now. Yet the Xerith did not remain passive. At last, enraged, they sent larger hunting packs, entire squadrons of ships, sweeping through suspected human hideouts. Flames consumed colonies thought hidden, and survivors screamed. A new Ward knew the war was changing. The shadows would not be enough forever. She turned to Rios and said, "It is time. We need something bigger." Rios held up his latest creation, a device no larger than a fist, but thrumming with violent energy. His voice was low. "But sure, this is no longer just a weapon. It is a storm. If we place it against their fleet, it will cripple them, but it may cripple us as well." Kai heard and stepped forward. "Then let us use it. We cannot wait. They will burn us all if we do not strike first." His voice cracked with desperation, but his eyes were steady. She closed her eyes only for a moment, then opened them with resolve. "Then we prepare for war on their scale." The survivors erupted into murmurs, some with fear, some with fire. But the course was set. The hunters had laughed, the hunters had mocked, yet the blood spilled in shadows had planted doubt in their hearts. And now humanity would move from shadows to storm. The resistance spread like wildfire across the stars. Hidden bases multiplied within asteroid belts, caves of fractured moons, and hollowed wreckage of dead ships. Humans, once scattered and broken, began to move with purpose. They struck quickly and vanished. Without trace, they left behind silence, but also fear. For the first time, the Xerith did not move through the galaxy as unquestioned predators. For the first time, they looked over their shoulders. Captain Elena Ward stood at the heart of this storm. Her voice carried across the scattered cells through stolen transmitters and coded signals. She directed each ambush, each strike. Each time a hunter patrol vanished, each time a ship limped home in ruins, her name whispered through the survivors. She became more than captain. She became symbol of the iron at the core of humanity's will. Dr Malik Rios worked tirelessly in his chamber of sparks, his fingers blackened by burns, his eyes hollowed by sleepless nights, but alive with unbroken fire. He had turned broken machines into weapons, turned scraps into storms. Each new device bore risk, but also brilliance. Neural disruptors had become sharp at their resonance, tuned to slice through living armor mines crafted from reactor fragments, clung to Xerith hulls like parasites, and detonated with surgical precision. His creations changed the battlefield. They turned fear into power, yet obsession gnawed at him. Every success drove him deeper into the need for perfection. Kai Morgan bled himself in a battle. He fought on ruined ground, and aboard shattered ships, his blade now steady as strikes merciless. He no longer saw himself. As boy, he was weapon-forged in grief, and sharpened in rage each Xerith he killed brought him closer to balance, yet the void inside him remained. He carried no laughter, no softness, only the fire of vengeance. He frightened some of the survivors. They saw in his eyes the same hunger they had once seen in the hunters, but when they faltered, he spoke words of iron. If they can bleed, then we can win. If they can fear, then we can break them. The raids grew bolder. A patrol ship ambushed in the ice fields of Vera. A hunting den burned to ash on the cliffs of Mirren. Even fleets felt the sting of human defiance. Ward orchestrated all. She struck not to conquer, but to cut. She chose targets with precision, leaving the hunters to wonder if the prey saw through their every move. The Xerith felt the shift. Their arrogance began to waver. Their council convened more often. Their songs of triumph. Less steady reports piled of hunters slain, of ships disabled by unseen forces. They could not accept it, yet they called the resistance an infestation to be burned away. They unleashed greater violence. Whole colonies incinerated. Entire populations vanished. Ward watched the flames from afar, and clenched her fist. She whispered through the static to the survivors. They think fire will silence us, but every flame only forges us harder. The war had become one of shadows, and whispers. Humanity fought from hiding, never standing in open fields. Yet with each battle, they grew stronger, more organized. The hunters began to fear the dark. The prey had become ghosts. Rios tested his most daring invention on the wreck of an abandoned station, a field generator that pulsed with resonance tuned to Xerith nerves. The effect was devastating. A group of hunters collapsed, screaming, their claws tearing their own armor, until silence claimed them. The survivors who witnessed it cheered. But Ward felt the weight of it. She looked at Rios and said, "You play with storms." He only answered, "Storms are all we have left." Kai was there too, watching the hunters ride. Before they died, he felt no pity, no hesitation, only grim satisfaction. He whispered, "Not enough," and sharpened his blade again. Yet shadows could not last forever. The Xerith adjusted. They sent fleets not just a hunt, but to scorch entire regions. They burned forests, poisoned seas. They turned survival itself into battle. Survivors began to falter. Some questioned Ward's leadership. Some whisper retreat, of abandoning the war. Ward silenced them with steel. "If we flee, there will be nowhere left. If we kneel, they will chain us until the last of us is bled dry. There is no choice but to fight." Still she felt the strain. She watched Kai grow harder, colder, more distant. She feared what vengeance would make of him. She watched Rios disappear into his work, consumed by equations and energy. She feared obsession might claim him. Yet she needed them both. They were the twin edges of the blade she wielded. Then came the day of the great ambush in the nebula of Shara, and Ward gathered every cell, every fighter, every weapon they could muster. The hunters had grown bold again, sweeping the sector with a fleet of cruisers. Ward saw opportunity. She whispered to her commanders, "Here the hunters will learn to fear the dark." The nebula cloaked the human ships. Their signals vanished into static. Rios devices pulsed across the mist, disrupting Xerith's sensors. The fleet drifted blind and uncertain, and in the shadows struck mines, clung to hulls, and detonated in silence. Ambush squads pierced through with weapons drawn. The hunters reeled, caught in a storm they could not see. Kai was among the first aboard a crippled ship. He carved his way through corridors slick with alien blood as fury, unrelenting, each kill a memory, avenged. Yet in the heart of the ship he found a Xerith larger than any before it, armor woven from countless kills. Its eyes glowed with cruel intelligence. It smiled as it fought not with fear, but with hunger. Kai battled it blade against claw. Sparks flew, screams echoed. At last, with a roar, he drove his weapon through its chest. The creature collapsed, its laughter fading into silence. Kai stood panting, bloody, victorious. But deep within he felt no peace, only emptiness. The ambush ended in triumph. Xerith ships fled, shattered. Survivors left behind their fleet broken in disgrace. For the first time in memory, the hunters had been forced into retreat. Humanity cheered the resistance, roared the prey, had bared its teeth and drawn blood. Ward stood before her people and declared, "We have taken their certainty. We have stolen their laughter. They will never see us as weak again." But victory carried Shadow Rios' device had burned out, leaving scars on the very ships of the humans. Some survivors whispered that the resonance had made them sick, their bodies shaken by invisible waves. Rios dismissed it as necessary, caused his obsession burn brighter. I can refine it, I can control it, I only need more time. Ward looked at him with unease, but she did not stop him. She knew without his storms they could not win. Kai returned from the battle with his eyes darker than before. His blade had drunk blood, yet his father's ghost still walked beside him. He whispered into the void, "Not enough, not yet." The Xerith Council swore to burn humanity from the stars. They prepared their greatest fleets, their most ruthless hunters. The galaxy shivered at the gathering storm. Ward knew it too. She stood at the viewport of her ship, staring at the stars, her reflection sharp, her eyes iron. She spoke softly. "They will come with all they have, and when they do, we will be ready." Rios entered, holding his latest design, a core thrumming with unstable power, his voice steady but heavy with obsession. "This is it, Captain, the storm perfected. But if we unleash it, there is no turning back." Kai stood at her side, his blade at his hip, his voice low and relentless. "Then unleash it. Let them come. We will show them who the true predators are." She clenched her fist and whispered, "Deploy the disruptors." The galaxy burned with silence before the storm. The Xerith gathered their greatest fleet, a wall of living ships vast enough to blacken constellations. Each vessel throbbed with alien life, armor fused with bone, and sinew cannons pulsed like veins prepared to spill oceans of fire. They came not as hunters, but as executioners. Their pride demanded nothing less than absolute annihilation. Captain Elena Ward stood at the command deck of the Resistance flagship, her eyes locked upon the endless swarm that closed around the nebula. She felt the weight of every soul aboard, every survivor across the scattered colonies. She had carried them through shadows and whispers, but shadows would not save them here. This was not ambush nor raid. This was survival against extinction. She spoke to the calm, her voice sharp with steel. "This is the moment. They believe us broken. They believe us weak. But today we show them who we are. Today we take back the stars." Around her, the survivors roared in response. Ships powered by scavenge cores lit their engines. Pilots strapped into cracked cockpits. Soldiers clutched weapons cobbled together from wreckage. They were outnumbered, outgunned, yet they burned with something the hunters could not fathom resolve. Dr Malik Rios stood bent over Control Hub, his latest creation, the perfected disruptor core pulsed in the heart of flagship. It radiated unstable power enough to cripple fleets or tear the humans apart, as well as hands trembled, but his eyes gleamed with obsession and hope both tangled. He whispered to himself, equations, numbers, fragments of thought. "It will hold, it must hold." Ward placed a hand upon his shoulder, steadying him. "We trust you. Doctor, make them bleed." Kai Morgan stood among the assault squads, his blade sharp and his armor dented from countless battles. His eyes burned not with fear, but with unyielding rage. He had waited for this moment since the day his father felt the ghost of the hunted walk with him, whispering through his veins. He muttered low, so only he could hear, "Father, I bring them to you." The battle began with silence, and the void erupted. The Xerith fleet surged forward, unleashing storms of fire. Entire asteroids shattered into dust-resistant ships, scattered, weaving through debris. Their returned fire cracked across the void, small in scale, yet precise. Rios activated the disruptor core, and a wave of resonance pulsed outward. Invisible, yet merciless Xerith ships convulsed their living hulls, screaming like beasts in agony. Sensors, blinded weapons flickering, entire formations faltered. Humans surged into the gaps, turning survival into Counterstrike. Ward commanded with fire, every order sharp, every maneuver ruthless. She turned desperation into art. Pilots followed her voice with unbreakable trust. They fought not for glory, but for the right to exist. She whispered between commands. They wanted prey. They wanted fear. We give them neither. On the ground, within a captured Xerith dreadnought, Kai led his squad through corridors dripping with aliens. Sinew the disruptor had weakened the hunters, but they still fought with feral power. Blades clashed against claws, blood sprayed across steel. Kai moved like a storm, carving through with relentless fury. Yet when he struck, he did not smile. His rage was cold. Focused, his men followed, inspired by his fire. At the heart of the dreadnought, he found the leader towering above all others, armor woven from the spines of countless kills, eyes burning with arrogant hunger. The creature laughed, its voice a guttural rasp. Prey with teeth is still prey. Kai raised his blade and answered with steel. The duel shook the ship. Blades flashed, claws raked, sparks flew across living walls. The Xerith struck with monstrous strength. But Kai endured every strike. His rage was heavier than pain, his was sharper than fear. He remembered his father's fall. He remembered the screams of Oricel. With each memory, he drove his blade deeper. At last, with a roar that echoed through steel, he plunged the weapon into the heart of the creature. The Xerith staggered, eyes wide with disbelief. For the first time, the predator New fear collapsed, and Kai whispered, "Not prey predator." Rios fought his own battle. At the core station, the disruptor overloaded its energy, burning hotter than he had imagined. Sparks leapt across panels, alarms screamed as assistants cried out for retreat. But Rios stood unmoving, his mind aflame with visions of victory and ruin. He whispered equations like prayers. As the core threatened to tear itself apart, Ward called across the chamber, "Rios, we need the storm. Hold it steady." Sweat poured down his face, his voice cracked, but certain. "I will hold." The Xerith fleet reeled, hundreds of ships disabled their living hulls, convulsing their formations, shattered the resistance, surged through, ripping apart the scattered hunters. One by one, the once mighty predators felt Ward stood at the command deck, her voice a steady fire. Push them, drive them, break them. Yet victory came at cost. Human ships fell burning into void, man, and women screamed across broken channels. Blood smeared every deck. But they did not falter. They fought with the knowledge that there was nowhere else to run, no retreat, no surrender, only survival or extinction. The disruptor screamed, its power surging beyond limit. The flagship shuddered, torn by the storm within. Rios gripped to console his body, shaking. His assistants begged him to shut it down. He refused. His voice broke, yet resolute. "If I fall, let me fall with them." The core roared a final pulse, and the Xerith fleet collapsed. Entire wings torn silent, their engines gutted, their weapons dead. The void filled with drifting corpses of ships once feared across the stars. Ward saw it. She knew the moment had come. She gave the final order. All ships strike, finish it. The resistance descended upon the crippled fleet. Blades fire and fury carved through what remained. The hunters screamed not with triumph, but with terror. Their war halls, their arrogance, their laughter, all shattered in that final storm. Kai returned from the dreadnought, his armor soaked, his blade scarred. His eyes were hollow yet alive. He looked toward, his voice low. "It is done." She placed a hand upon his shoulder, her voice softer than command. "Your father will be proud." He closed his eyes for a moment, and for the first time in years, he felt a whisper of peace. Rios collapsed beside the disruptor, his body broken by strain, yet his eyes still burning. He whispered as Ward knelt by him. "It worked, Captain, it worked," she answered. "You gave us more than survival, you gave us the future." He smiled faintly, then drifted into unconsciousness. The battlefield grew silent. The Xerith fled. What few ships remained, retreating into the abyss. Their fleet, broken, their leaders, dead, their arrogance, shattered. The predators had become prey. Her voice carried not only to them, but across the colonies to every hidden ear. "We were hunted, we were broken, we were prey. But no longer today we rise, not as survivors, but as predators. We will not kneel again, we will not scatter again. The galaxy knows now humanity stands." Soldiers raised weapons in triumph. Hope, once fragile, now burned like a star. Kai was not victim, not prey. He was warrior. He was hunter. He whispered into the void, "Father, it is enough." She stood upon the deck of the flagship, staring into the stars, each light a reminder of loss, each spark a promise of tomorrow. She whispered, "The hunters thought us broken. They thought us weak. Now they will remember this. We are the predators now." And in the silence of the galaxy, the words lingered like fire.